These figures are absolutely mind-blowing. They are extraordinary. The change to our country in every way is beyond belief. And now the cost of illegal immigration. And when you think about it, 5.38 million without counting the everyday cost of a channel, the Manston Centre, is something like 4 to 5 times the cost of what they want to save on the winter fuel allowance from pensioners and what they want to take away from farmers. It gives you a sense of perspective that perhaps government has got the wrong priorities. And I'm joined now by Tom Pursglove, and Tom was the Minister for Legal Migration, having previously been the Minister for Illegal Migration and in charge of borders during that period of 23-24. Now, before I speak to him, I want to confess, folks, he's a friend of mine, but I'm not very happy with him. Tom, these figures, you were the minister. The government had promised in the 2010 manifesto, the 2015 manifesto, the 2017 manifesto to reduce the numbers to tens of thousands a year. And here we find for 1 year, it's nearly 1 million. Is this not a complete betrayal of trust of Brexit and Conservative voters?
Well, I totally accept that those numbers were far too high. And when Rishi Sunak asked me to become the Legal Migration Minister in December last year, I was given a very clear instruction that we had to bring these numbers down drastically. Now, that ONS figure that is being cited today in these reports is totally unacceptable, as I say. But there are also other figures that have been released by the Home Office that show that the reforms that James Cleverly and I took forward are very dramatically actually bringing visa grants down. So, for example, the health and care visa, what we've seen is an 85% reduction in main applicants. When it comes to the skilled worker visa, a 32% fall. And when it comes to, for example, student dependent numbers, those are down by 84%. And that is materially relevant because it does show that at the point at which those levers have been pulled, it is making a difference. And that is the framework that Brexit has allowed us to have. So there are some very strong foundations, I think, that we can build on here to get these numbers vastly down, because you're right to say it's completely unacceptable. The position as it was, it is improved, but there's probably still distance to travel.
Using the internet without a VPN is a bit like taking to the road without car insurance. All it takes is one unlucky moment to cost you a lot of cash. We want to help protect you. This video's sponsor, Private Internet Access, is the VPN to help keep you safe. Now, you might be asking, what is a VPN? Well, a virtual private network is an app that hides your IP address and safeguards your internet connection through an encrypted tunnel. This way, it shields your digital life from the eyes of those that are looking to exploit your private information. Whenever you connect to the internet on a public Wi-Fi network, such as at airports, coffee shops, friends' houses, or even in your own home, your data is at risk of being stolen. Hackers that are connected to the same Wi-Fi network have the ability to steal your personal data with ease. T-Mobile reached a settlement this year with the US Federal Communications Commission after they suffered data breaches in 2021, 22, and 23. In 2023 alone, over 37 million customers' data was exposed. And it's not just hackers to be concerned about. Information can be censored. When Canada passed their C-18 bill, social media giants decided to ban news content on their platforms. But PIA can protect your ability to consume the news content that you love. Private Internet Access is available for all platforms: Windows, macOS, Android, Linux, iOS, and you can use one Private Internet Access subscription to protect an unlimited number of devices at the same time. Plus, we've got a huge GBNews discount. Click the link in this video's description and you'll get 83% off PIA. That is under £2 a month, and you'll get an extra 4 months completely free. There's also a 30-day money-back guarantee. So head to piavpn.com/GBNews to start protecting yourself digitally today.
Tom, it hasn't improved. Even if you tell me individual areas that have fallen, which you've just done, and that's fine, I don't dispute what you've just said, but how, if you've done those things, is the figure, and by the way, I expect it'll get revised up in 6 and 12 months' time, how is it still net, not gross, net, 750,000 a year?
Well, the Migration Observatory have been very clear in saying that there has been, on the back of those changes, a very sharp fall in visa grants. That I always said, actually, I was asked to take on this role back in December 2023 with that clear instruction to bring the numbers down. I always said that this was a step that we should take with those changes. Labour have wound back some of those changes around the minimum income requirement, for example, which I think is the wrong choice. They could change their position on that today to help bring these numbers down. But there's other choices that can be taken. So I supported in the election the position around having annual caps. Let Parliament decide what an appropriate level of immigration is, bearing in mind the skills needed in our economy and, of course, our public services. To take a pragmatic view to this, you could look again at the graduate route. I personally believe very strongly, and always have, that we need a comprehensive labour market strategy. But there's choices there that can be made. I'm sceptical about government and Labour MPs being interested in a number of those approaches. But what is also very, very clear is that the illegal migration picture makes it much harder to deal with this, because you cannot separate the two ultimately. The demand pressures and the pressures on public services, for example, are exacerbated by illegal migration. And the strategy from the government have no deterrent at all. It's really disastrous.
OK, well, let's talk about illegal immigration, right? And you were the Minister for Illegal Immigration before you got the legal job. Ever since Lyd Airport, when Boris Johnson stood there and said, we're launching the Rwanda plan, and Rishi as leader said, stop the boats, and James Cleverly, stupidly, said the numbers were coming down after a period of very bad weather, we've seen the numbers today. Sure, since Starmer came to power, 6,000 more have gone into hotels. That's his problem. But going back to your period, the bill for illegal migrants in the last year rose by 36%. And yesterday we had Kemi Badenoch, robotically reading off an order queue saying, we're going to get this sorted. Why should anyone believe you guys ever again?
Well, if we want to talk about my record, Nigel, and you know that I'm very fond of you as well, and so these are not necessarily the easiest conversations for us to have, but the fact is I took through the House of Commons and through Parliament the Nationality and Borders Act, and the changes that were introduced through that legislation did a number of things, but one of them was to make it a much more robust consideration of asylum claims. And again, the figures today show that that has made a very marked difference, with the grant rate now falling to 52%, up from about 75%. So that is an important part of my legacy in terms of the framework to deal with these issues going forward. But again, if I were the government, I don't see what they have to lose than to get on and say sorry to the Rwandan government and operationalise that policy, because nothing can be worse than seeing people lose their lives in the Channel. I am absolutely convinced that we have to do something fundamentally different. It is novel, but if we want to tackle this, you have to look outside the box. There is a policy there with a legislative basis. Try it. What could be worse than people losing their lives in the way that we've seen? Because if you haven't got that sort of policy intervention in place, all you're going to see is unlimited numbers of people arriving from various nationalities, because you've got nowhere to remove them to, because you can't remove them back to their country of origin. But if you've got a solution like Rwanda, you can send people to that third country, where in the end, ultimately, the Rwandan government was saying that they would provide sanctuary for those people. And I think that...
Well, I tell you what, Tom,
another fundamental plank of the policy that they've dismantled.
If I take the premise, if I take the premise that Rwanda could have worked, I also remember that the aeroplane was on the tarmac and an unnamed single judge, probably without legal training in Strasbourg, made an intervention that stopped that plane from leaving. Let me ask you a last question. Can we deal with illegal immigration if we stay part of the European Convention on Human Rights?
So I think it's quite clear that there is a real level of frustration and concern about the role that the ECHR plays in terms of deportations and removals from our country. I think we should be having conversations about what can be done to address that, and we shouldn't rule anything out. If it comes to it and that situation cannot be resolved, then these are the options that we should carefully look at. But it seems to me that this is not just a challenge for us, it's a challenge for countries that are affected by this. And so actually, let's see if it's possible to negotiate that situation. Let's see if we can resolve it. But if we can't, then I would not personally rule out, for example, having a referendum or to take the step that's necessary to make sure that we can remove people who've got no right to be here and dangerous foreign criminals who pose a threat to people on our streets.
Tom Pursglove, thank you for joining us live here tonight on GB News. And Tom there setting out his views. I personally think we're way beyond considering whether we should leave the ECHR. I think it's pretty clear that if we don't, we'll never sort any of this out.